Welcome to Why We Talk, Orange Chair Series. I'm Dr. LaRonda McGross, CEO at YWCA Central Alabama. Join us each episode as we engage in conversation with thought leaders and influencers working to break down barriers and build bridges to create systems change. So please pull up a chair and join us. Good afternoon and welcome to Why We Talk Orange Chair Series, a platform for leaders and visionaries to discuss important topics impacting women and women of color in our community. Here we build bridges in the space of indifference. I am Dr. LaRonda McGrath, CEO of YWCA Central Alabama. Today's discussion was made possible by our good friends at Alabama Power. We are so grateful for your support. In the shadow of the pandemic nightmare, another scary story began to unfold. The She Session, as it has been coined, saw nearly 3 million American women, the majority of the job loss in 2020, leave the workforce. In December, the rates of long-term unemployment for Asian women, Black women, and Latinas hovered around 40%. Now, empowering women of color in the workplace comes into focus as women attempt to re-enter the job market and as those who remained employed contend with long existing inequities. This topic raises questions. Are there gender and racial biases that exist as norms in corporate culture? Are employers doing enough to support and uplift women in the workplace? And do women of color truly have a seat at the decision-making table? This is Why We Talk. Many thanks again to our sponsor, Alabama Power. And it is now my honor to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Louise Duncan. Louise serves as the Program Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Alabama Power. Louise, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. McGrath, and thank you all for having me here today. It is an honor to moderate such a relevant topic. I am so excited to introduce our esteemed panelists. To reserve time, you can read their bios online at ywcabham.org. But I am also glad to have with us today Anita Clemon, an Assistant Vice President for Institutional Equity at UAB Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and a former YWCA Central Alabama Junior Board member. Hello. Lachey Reeves, a Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Human Resources for First Horizon Bank.
Hello.
Tarkessa Colvin, who is the founder and CEO of Influence Now Media and Dream for Impact Consultant. Mindy Cento, Mentor Coordinator for Momentum, a leadership organization that empowers promising women to develop leadership skills. Wow. And Yasmin Cavell, founder and CEO of GLOW, member of the YWCA Board of Directors. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, we're going to jump right in, and Anita will get us started. So, Anita, why is the empowerment of women of color in the workplace a social justice issue?
Thank you, Louise. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. Let's just start off with no pressure. According to the Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham and their 2020 report on the status of women in Alabama, there are over 1.9 million women ages 18 and up here in the state, and more than 34% of those women are women of color. That report not only looked at gender, but it also disaggregated the data by race, age, and family composition. And these intersections are important to examine because we know that women of color face something called compounding inequities. By that, I mean that we experience barriers to income, barriers to education, and even healthcare disproportionately. This information is also important because we know that in the US, women earn 82 cents to every dollar a man does. In Alabama, that figure is 73 cents. For Black and Latina women in our state, it's even less. It's 58.5 cents and 48.8 cents, respectively. Those numbers indicate, and we know through research, that intersectional discrimination perpetuates wealth gaps, it limits access, and impedes advancement. And in that report, it references this dilemma as racialized structural barriers to well-being. Well, I'm here today to call a thing and let you know that women of color have different lived experiences in and out of the workplace. Because racism, sexism, unconscious bias, the lack of access to resources, the lack of access to childcare, double standards, and unfair policies are real. And that's why it becomes a social justice issue. Equal rights, equal opportunity, equal treatment are all essential expectations for every person, but particularly for women of color. According to a leanin.org and SurveyMonkey poll that was held in February of this year, it's a fact that women of color tend to carry the larger burden for caregiving. We're also overrepresented in lower wage paying jobs. We're less likely to have access to benefits like paid leave, which means we can't take time off if we're sick or if the children are sick. In that poll, over the past year, 47% of Black women and 41% of Latinas have gone to work when they should have stayed at home because they were sick or because they didn't have childcare. The cost of childcare puts women of color in an impossible position. They need childcare to go to work, but they have to go to work to pay for the childcare. We're also more likely to be denied home loans, which affects long-term sustainability and the transfer of wealth. We know from a McKinsey study that was done with leanin.org, women of color are more likely to experience workplace harassment. We're often held to a higher standard than our white male peers. We're presumed to be less qualified despite our credentials, and the pay data shows that. And we receive less support from managers, according to that study. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. We have to close the gender and racial pay gaps. We have to address the issues that disproportionately affect women of color, particularly Black women and Latinas. This means raising the minimum wage, making childcare more accessible and certainly more affordable, and providing for a national paid family leave. All of these are social justice issues. With that, I'll end by saying that it's my hope that we leave here today understanding that we can't just focus on empowering women of color without making an effort to understand and address the unique challenges that we face. True empowerment embraces DEI, can only be celebrated when all women experience equal access to opportunities, receive equal pay, and are treated fairly. We also want to make sure that we are recognized and promoted for the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. That was great. And I really love the fact how you closed out is on understanding the unique challenges that we all face. That is very key in being very inclusive with that. So thank you so much. So with the, we're gonna move on to next. So with the recognition of these systemic issues that affect women of color and their opportunities for advancement in the workplace, we saw institutions begin to invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals, programs, and departments. Lachey, would you speak to the role of DE&I in empowering women of color in the workplace?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for this opportunity. So as you mentioned, the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we play a pivotal part. So with that, it is our responsibility to ensure that we have access, making sure that we have support, and making sure that women of color have an opportunity and have a voice. And so it's so funny that we're on this topic because I literally got into HR and D&I due to just me being in the banking industry. And I wanted to be a commercial relationship banker, which is the highest level you can have and has the greatest earning potential. And so coming out of college, I was told where there isn't a place for Black women in this field, which again led me to HR, specifically D&I. So some things that we have to do to make sure that DEI is a pivotal part to ensuring women of color has a place in the workplace is making sure that we amplify the women's voice and ideas. So you can definitely imagine being in a meeting, being on a conference call, you have a comment, you have an idea, and it's completely ignored, or no one thinks that your idea is of relevant to the organization. So when it comes to D&I, it's really about making sure women have a seat at the table, but then also that their voice is an active participant in the conversation. So think about, again, as you mentioned, why we're overshadowed by our male counterparts. So by making sure that we have an opportunity to amplify women's voice and ideas, so stopping to make sure that women are heard, start to make sure that women's ideas are understood, that is a pivotal part of why DEI is important. In addition, with diversity, equity, and inclusion is really about still making sure that women still have opportunities. So we know when it comes to corporate America, most of our hiring decisions, sadly, are still completed behind closed doors. So who do I know? Who's there? Who am I mentoring? And typically it's not women, and then specifically it's not women of color. So the part of D&I is going back to accessibility. Does everyone, especially women, have an opportunity to the same access to promotion and pay? While we're having those conversations of succession planning, has the company developed and invested in that woman? Has that company given them the tools and resources that they need in order to advance? Because again, as we know, when those conversations are had behind closed doors, we again know that women are left out. And so another thing that DEI plays a pivotal part is making sure that we have consequential accountability. So in the role of DEI, we know that we have a lot of programs, we have a lot of benefits, we have a lot of projects, but are we now holding our managers, our leaders accountable to actually ensure and do what we're saying that we're going to do? Most of the time she may hear like, oh, we can have unconscious bias training, but is that enough? And is that really supporting and providing results for women of color? So along with that, consequential accountability, just making sure that whatever corporate America say that they're going to do, that they actually do it. So for those two things, that is just a tip of the iceberg and a starting point for us to make sure that women of color are empowered in the workplace.
That is great. That's a good response to that. And one of the things that I like to highlight, especially for those who are tuned in, is the opportunities. Having a seat at the table, having those opportunities to grow so that you can speak on and encourage and support and bring others forward. So that is awesome. So please take note of that for those who are joining us today. So Tarkessa, this question is for you. As a CEO, you get to direct the culture of your company. How can corporations or organizations assess whether gender and racial biases exist as norms in their corporate culture? And what are some ways to address the lack of empowerment women may feel in these corporations or organizations?
That's a great question, and I'm so excited to get to answer this, and I'll try to be concise with it because there's so much that I can say. First and foremost, as leaders, we have a responsibility. In leadership, especially C-suite leadership, we know that it's pretty siloed off. You're at the upper echelon, and there are just certain things that you don't experience. So if you want to take the temperature of your company, you have to do just that. You have to ask. If you're wondering if you have a healthy organization, you have to ask the people in the organization. The best way that I think that you can do that is to have a third party come in and do an assessment, because a third party organization coming in is going to be less threatening than you sitting in front of your boss, your leader, your whoever, however you earmark their role, and having to have a crucial conversation. If there hasn't been that type of environment before, it's not going to go well. It's just not. So whether you call it a culture assessment or a healthy organization assessment, that's essential. That is going to be your baseline for figuring out what's happening top down, bottom up. And if you don't know what that means from the C-suite down and from whatever the lower roles are up. It's very important. You can't have sick roots and beautiful leaves. You can't have sick leaves and the roots are beautiful or healthy. And so that's very important. As a leader, for me, it is important to understand I cannot pour from an empty cup. I can't lead if I'm not doing the things necessary to sharpen myself. And so that is what leaders have to do. I don't care what your title is. I don't care what your role is. We don't know everything about everything. There's always room for improvement. And once you are at a leadership role, those are two things that should be happening. You should be taking the temperature of your company, and you should also be doing something to develop yourself. Specifically around DEI, it is so important to understand which E you're talking about. Are you talking about equity or are you talking about equality? Equality and equity are not the same thing. Equality says that you can't turn me away because my name is Tarkessa, I have an afro, and I'm a Black woman. Equity means that once I'm in the doors, though, I have an equal opportunity to flourish. It means I'm not expected to get the coffee, I'm expected to lead the meeting. And so when you are in leadership, that is essential that you understand that. And so taking the temperature of your company and making sure that you're being sharpened, because you are siloed off. You haven't had to be the front-facing customer service. You don't know what they're facing. You don't know what the internal customer service is like, because the reality is internal customer service for you as the VP is very different than internal customer service for you as the call center representative. And so those are some things that I think are very important. And the last thing that I'll say, I'll try to say it's the last thing, but this might be my third closing. What I will say is making sure that people are heard is important. The best way, the most effective way to build something that is inclusive is to make sure that people not only have a seat at the table, but that they are heard and acknowledged once they are there. I don't know about anybody else. Have you ever been at Thanksgiving dinner and you're like, can you pass me it's the same feeling, right? In boardrooms, just like Lachey was just saying, there's nothing more deflating and makes a person feel more defeated than to have something to say and people look you dead in your face and disregard you. Making sure that people, period, but especially because of this conversation, women of color are heard is important. I don't care if that's a survey. I don't care if that's setting up a liaison, suggestion box, message in a bottle, whatever you have to do, making sure that women know, especially in corporate environments and the way that we're operating today, how do I get heard? If it's not in this setting, then how do I get heard? Because if you can't get heard, you can't get served. And if you can't get served, you can't serve people. And that's it. That's my answer to the question.
Hey, that's a good answer to the question. I love it. I love it. And one of the things I wanted to make sure I highlight is take the temperature. And another key thing that you highlighted, utilize someone that's the third party, because it's something that when you assess yourself, because it's hard to tell someone closely that your baby is ugly. So a third party assessing you can give you some true, something to really take home and really to align where you need to go forward as a company. So thank you for that. So let's move forward on to our next. Empowerment has a dual meaning when it comes to this topic. We're not only talking about the authority or power corporations or organizations can give to women employees, but we're also talking about giving women the support, encouragement, training, and resources they need to build confidence in themselves as they grow and develop into leaders or highly skilled professionals. Mindy, how can employers uplift women and employees of color in ways that embolden them to empower themselves?
I love this question. And I actually am glad that I'm following Tarkeza to kind of build upon what she talked about. So within the organization that I'm working for, Momentum Leaders, it is a very small team, and we hold each other accountable and have these kind of conversations very openly, for which I'm grateful. And I feel like that piece of being a role model is very important, setting the tone for your organization to show that you will be an ally to that person, and a woman of color who has any needs or issues feels seen and heard. It was interesting as I started my role as mentor coordinator, which was just about 2 years ago. One of my first conversations was with a woman of color, and she outright, asked me, being a woman of color, I want to make sure that I am seen as equal in my organization, and that whenever I speak up, that it's not looked at as being aggressive. So I want to learn how to navigate those conversations. And I was so grateful that she trusted me with that conversation, and because it's not my lived experience. So advocating for yourself is really important. And as the organization, hearing that and taking action to help somebody feel like they can, in fact, do these things and move themselves forward. all of our mentees who come to the table are women, and they are advocating for themselves to make change and improve where they are, whether it's organization or, trying something on their own. And so that piece of empowerment is so very important. And I feel like this has to be an open conversation. I'm grateful, once I get off a call with a mentee, I can go to anyone on my team and say, hey, I need some assistance with this. I need somebody to pair with me to find the right person, because I'm going to go to work and make sure that I advocate for them. They have given me that power, and so I'm going to pay that forward. So I feel like it's this give and take, and there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done in this particular on this particular topic. And being transparent is a very important piece of that.
Thank you so much. I love the part where you said transparent. And that's something I know here at Alabama Power, we took a definitely a look at that and being transparent and how we can improve in those areas. We all, as companies, have room for improvement, but we definitely have to dig deep and look at those opportunities where we reveal things and how that we address those as we move forward. So thank you, Mindy. Now, we understand that it is important for corporations and organizations to value the empowerment of women, particularly due to systematic factors. Women of color, Yasmin, as you think about your culture and your experience as a career woman and as a CEO, can you give us a few examples of how women of color can be made to feel a sense of inclusion, belonging, and equity in the workplace?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I mean, listening to my other panelists, I've learned so much already, and I admire all of you so much already. So thank you so much for that. I want to start with a story of when I first started my business. I just finished the Velocity Accelerator program at Innovation Depot. And I launched my business, launched a market, and I decided to get a space in Innovation Depot. And the day I was moving in, I saw another CEO, woman CEO, coming toward me. She was moving out, I was moving in. And I said, hey, oh my gosh, I've heard about your business. It's so amazing. Any pointers that you could give me as a female CEO? And she looked at me and she said, I have one thing to say to you. She's like, keep your head down, work hard, and keep your mouth shut, and you'll get far in this place. And I was so taken back by that because, one, I never thought she would say that. Like I would always think that women just want to empower other women and all that. And she was really serious. And I said, thank you. And I went back to my empty office. I sat down and I said, how can I change this? See, I never experienced anything like that. I'm from the beauty business and the beauty industry and the fashion industry, where women play powerful roles. I see powerful women everywhere in my career. And so when I came into the tech world as a CEO, I quickly found out that that is not the case. I would be in rooms where it was mostly males, white males, and I was literally the only Latin tech CEO in the room. And I decided right then and there that I would create roles for women in my company and being part of my company that were not only from the bottom up, but from the top to the bottom, just like you said. So I started with my investors. So all my investors are women. Do you know how hard that is? to do. It's very hard, but I was very strategic. I found great investors, women that believed in me and believed in my company. That's one. Two, your board. My board is 50% women, 50% women of color. Okay. And so I created these roles because I wanted to be supported. I wanted them to have a seat in the table. I wanted them to be loud and have a voice and be part of these big ideas and big decisions that I make on a daily basis to make my business thrive. Okay. And then it trickles down all the way down to even my Glow Pros, my beauty professionals. I am very strategic. I try to include every race, every ethnic background, every kind of background in that. And so people can feel inclusive. And so the big takeaway is creating those roles and not sitting down, putting your head down, not talking and working hard. Yes, work hard, but be the loudest in the room. Be heard. Your ideas matter. And if they are not heard there, create roles and put people in power so they can hear that. And yeah, that's my advice, and it's worked great for me. And I really encourage other women to do that and to create businesses that really value women in these big roles.
Man, that's powerful, and that's bold, and just speechless. And one of the things about being intentional, that's it. Takeaway, if you did not hear, her board member is 50% women of color. Now, Liz, hey, I must say, that's amazing. And your investors are women. Now that's taking a stance, and that's leading by example. And I commend you in that space. And Yasmin, it's such amazing to have you where you are and to hear your story and you sharing it here. And I've seen you in other settings where you have absolutely been in that space and shared that story and given those same words of encouragement, but being very affirmative about being intentional where we should go. And that is important. So I would like to go right into, we have some more time. I think we can dive in a few other questions that please feel free for us, the panel, to jump in. But I would like to kind of ask this question. When we talked earlier about equity, equality, there's a difference. So let's talk about D&I has been simplified as diversity equals difference. Equity equals fairness, and inclusion equals belonging. Some critics say these are a little more than corporate buzzwords that are chatted around the meetings and put in documents that sit on the shelf somewhere along the way. We're utilizing them as some good keywords to use. So how do we make sure D&I is integrated into our daily work, is truly impactful, and is accepted as a great for business at all levels of an organization? And how do we protect the integrity of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? Let's see, Anita, will you share with us on this?
Sure, thank you. From my perspective, I think the first thing that we have to do, and it's been mentioned before, is there's a top-down approach. And we also need to make sure that everyone understands that DE&I is not just the responsibility of the DE&I office. It's everyone's responsibility. In order to change the culture of an organization, everyone in that organization has to drink the water, so to speak. everyone has to be willing to jump on board and make sure that we're creating an inclusive environment for new hires, for people who have been here 10 years, for people who have been here 30 years. That inclusivity is a way of ensuring that everyone believes in the process of DE&I, and everyone is on board with it. And you know, we have times where we interact with folks who it takes a little while longer for them to get on the train, but that's okay. Changing culture doesn't happen in a day. And we recognize that and understand that. But there's something to be said about coming into an environment and feeling like you belong here. So the culture of the organization is a responsibility for all that work in that organization. And that's my 2 cents for right now. I'm sure I have more to say.
Those are good. Those are good. I would like to see, Lachey, will you share your thoughts on that question as well?
Absolutely. And so I love how you said that I believe some corporations, they continue to use it as buzzwords. And so I do feel that corporate America, we have to go beyond what the buzzwords or what people may think DEI is, because a lot of the time you'll hear corporations say, well, we hire X amount of people, like we have such great programs, and you know, our survey was so awesome and everyone feels love. But is that literally moving the needle, as you mentioned, to provide equity, equality, and inclusion? You know, it makes no sense for us to have programs, events, happy hours to say that we brought in 15 women of color when we have 85 leaving, right? So one of the things that I'm so excited and proud about the company that I've worked for and just being in the banking industry is now we have to do a shift. So we just can't rely on what we think is right or just based upon what we see, but we have to incorporate our evidence and data. So as someone mentioned, you know, if we do have surveys, what are they saying? What are women of color saying? And how can we truly move the needle and move beyond talk? And one of the ways that we can do that is hitting it where it hurts, our pockets. So how can we make sure DEI is embedded in the conversation? And so if we say, you know, from a leadership perspective, from a CEO, from the C-suite, you know, it's easy to say, okay, well, I care about diversity. Well, do you care enough where now your performance is associated with DEI, making it increase and moving it up with the company? And that dictates your next promotion, or that dictates your next promotion, not promotion, but your next raise, benefits, and equity compensation. So from that, now we're talking a different language where now we can really move the needle and be very intentional, making sure that we do have the evidence base behind it, but then also the data as it relates to compensation.
That's good. So let's go on to another question. I think we have some more time, so this is great. Role modeling is important in corporations and organizations. Employees look into the upper echelons of leadership for examples of how they should operate. Please share some actions your organization leadership has taken to create an inclusive work environment for women. Are there empowered women of color on your executive teams? And is there leadership buy-in for making sure women of color feel and are empowered? Parkessa, can you just jump in and start with that one?
Yeah, first of all, let me say this in reference to the other question. Diversity trainings. This part right here is just, it's a whole thing. Most diversity trainings are designed simply so we don't get sued. And we can't go on like that. There has been a study, you can Google it, I will tell you some numbers. There was a study of over 829 companies over 31 years, and they showed that diversity training had no positive effect in the average workplace. Why? Because they were checking a box. We can't continue to go on that way. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just about your company that you're working for, it's an everyday thing. This is everyday life. And understanding that is pivotal for our communities and our culture to keep evolving. So that's one. And the part of that, going to the second question around being a role model, it's understanding that right there. When, as a leader, bringing people into the fold, into this culture, you need to understand two things. You need to understand what type of leader you are. Are you an inspirational leader, motivational leader? Are you all of those different types of things, because people are watching you. The worst thing that could have ever happened to me, a person who is very empathetic and sympathetic and loves to learn, is to have a bad boss. Because I don't need to pick up those habits, because I'm watching you. I think about that as I lead in my family. I think about that as I lead in my company. I think about that as I consult with Dream 4. People are watching me. One of the things I'm blessed to work with participants and help them reach goals and set goals. And one of the things that a participant said to me is, I'm so glad I'm connected to you on LinkedIn, because you're doing stuff too. You're doing things too. So even though my role isn't that of a leader, they're watching me. They're watching to see if I bought into the things that I'm asking them to do, that I'm recommending for them to do. As a leader, and we say leader, but I don't mean job titles. As someone who is leading and have people coming a couple of steps behind them, it's very important to be aware of that. People aren't just watching how I do this with these 3.5 degrees. They're watching how I interact with my daughters. They're watching how I interact with my husband and my sister. And, they're watching the relationship. DE&I is really about relationship. It's a roadmap to relationship. That's all that is. And so when we talk about that, and when you're understanding who you are and how you are as a role model, and what you're modeling, that piece specifically, there's a shift that can happen. There's a shift that can happen. If you have a platform, you're a role model. You just are. There's someone who is imitating, who is inspired or ignited by you, and who is activated by you. And you have to take that very seriously. So as leaders, make sure you're filling up your own cup, because they're watching, right? Show the buy-in. They want to drink the Kool-Aid too. If you're not educating and sharpening yourself, if you're not, reading a book or whatever the thing is to be better at whatever it is that you are doing, you can't really ask people to do the same, do what you're not doing. And that's my perspective on the role model aspect of it.
Good. Mindy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so the organizational piece and all of those people who make up Momentum, it is part of the culture. It is every person who comes through that door through our executive leadership programs and our upward classes. They are all taught this and modeled by our team of women. And we even have now a Men with Momentum piece where the first cohort is almost through, I believe, in their involvement with Momentum. So they meet once a month, and they are allies for women in their organization. So it's this ripple effect that happens and paying it forward. So everybody who comes on to the mentoring program, it is what we have set as a standard. And I feel like, going back to that piece of the transparency, it is what you know what we're about. And that is really important to set that standard right from the beginning.
Yasmin, I know you spoke earlier about, I close it out by being bold and very intentional. So I would love to get your thoughts on that question as well. Please share.
Of course. I think it's really important for you to be transparent in what you believe in with every person you sit in the room with. Whether it's an interview, you have to understand that these people that you're talking to, whether it's your employee, whether it's someone in your leadership team, whether it's an investor, whether it's a board member, that they're investing in you, in your ideas, in what you believe to be true. And I think that once you're very transparent in that, I think they grasp it and they respect it. So our mission statement at Glow is to empower women to achieve excellence through beauty. That is our guiding star. Everything we do here is based on that guiding star. We want to empower women, whatever that looks like, in any role. And every time they walk through that door, whether you're a client, a Glow Pro, an investor, a leader, boss, whatever, we want to empower them and make them feel excellent. And so I think creating that environment, again, from the top to the bottom, from bottom to the top is really important, and being transparent in those values and really carrying it through daily goal settings, just conferences, just talking about the business, and using those words, empowering and inclusive and equality. I think it has to be almost an everyday thing. And I think that is in our company. And again, I think, making sure I had women investors, that was a huge, bold move. It wasn't easy to do. And so I think when people hear that, people are like, oh, she's intentional. And I think that plays a huge role and in every day, because again, when people are sitting down, they know Yaz is women power. Yaz is Latin. Yaz is, it's all these things. And you could see that in her company, and her clients are from every race, every walk of life. And that's really important.
That is, thank you. I think we have a little bit more time. We can address maybe another question. And here's one. I think I would like to hear all the panel to give me their thoughts on this. What are some effective ways corporations or organizations can celebrate not only the diversity of their employees, but their employees' diverse ideals and perspectives?
I'll start. I think, I love great ideas. A great idea is what that's how I created Glow, right? The one great idea. And I really feel like in order to have a really great business, a really great company, there has to be different perspectives and different ideas. And when you hear those ideas, try them out. I am the type of CEO that makes quick decisions, whether it's good or bad. Okay, let's try it. Okay, cut it. And that's part of having a business. That's part of being in a company. Bringing those ideas to fruition, whether it's coming from someone not in a leadership role or someone in a leadership role. It has to come from every direction, and you have to be able to take it, make it happen so they can see that they are valued, and that their ideas matter, because one great idea can change the whole trajectory of a business. It really can. I've seen it so many times. Businesses pivoting because one great idea. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
I'd like to go. So,
All right.
First of all, another great question. And this is a simple answer. Ask. right? So often we hear, and I just had this conversation, we hear, we want a seat at the table or make a way for a seat at the table. But what if I don't want to sit at your table? What if I want my own table? Have you asked me? What if I want to stand at the table? What if I want to stand on the table? Like, those are some things that's a simple solution. Ask it. I never make an assumption about someone's culture, beliefs, or any of that. And if I want to know, I ask. What happens there is it moves us closer. We start building relationships. I make no assumption. I tell people all the time, Mindy has heard this, don't just assume that I happen to be 7% Irish. I have the papers to prove it. It's usually a conversation starter, but asking, there's so many things that differentiate us and that can start a conversation of you just getting to know someone, especially in a leadership role, and ask on purpose. Going back to what Yasmin said, be intentional. If you're asking me about my kids, when we talk again, remember their names. Remember that I have kids. Remember the conversations that we've had, right down to there are certain people in our corporation that they don't celebrate Thanksgiving, or they don't celebrate Halloween, or they don't celebrate Christmas. A simple thing, ask a question. I understand that. What do you celebrate? When is that? Why? Can you tell me more about it? That question alone, can you tell me more? Is powerful. Or help me understand. Powerful. That is how people can be heard. And also, you get to know more about who it is that you're working with 8 to 10 or 12 hours a day. How powerful is that? So simply ask.
I feel like something that Yasmin mentioned earlier about letting the person speak, that really has compounding interest, so to speak, because if you allow that person to voice those ideas, then that increases their confidence and empowers them to bring more to the table. They're going to feel like they have some buy-in in that organization and those conversations. And whether it's creating big or small change, that's really important to build somebody up within your team and to make them feel important.
And I would definitely have to say, give associates an opportunity to lead. They necessarily don't have to be a leader on paper, but they can lead a committee, they can lead a project, they can lead an idea, and just allow that to flourish and grow. I think most of the times what we see, or if we have people of color, especially women, give an idea, then either that leader or the interpreter may not understand it or can't see the entire vision. So if they can't see it and if they can't understand it, then it's probably not going to take place. It's not going to happen. If you continue to see, feel, and hear that, then I know for women, or especially me, you may not even offer your advice. So in addition to that, give them the space and the opportunity, the tools and the resources to lead and allow them to flourish, because everyone wants to be recognized, but also everyone wants to do a great job. So that's a great way to do so as well.
Thank you. Anita?
I really don't have anything else to add. When you asked the question, the first thing that came to my mind was include them. Offer spaces for inclusion. One of the things that we have done, I think a really good job of, is offering space for conversation. When you have conversations, you learn, and Tarkessa said it, when you're asking questions about a person and truly being intentional about hearing what they're saying and listening, that's a bond that you can't turn away from. That bond is there forever, honestly. That supports the sense of belonging. Again, I've said it twice already, that supports a sense of belonging in an organization, and therefore supports the culture, the change in the culture and the work environment. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been a great conversation. And that is exactly how I feel about, it was a panel discussion, but in reality, it was a true conversation. Thank you for all the great words and thoughts that you've shared, some resources, tools that I think for those who attending today's session can really take this and package it and utilize that in their space in some other way and share with others. Like I say, wow, women empowerment is such an important issue. I mean, we can go and could chat about this all day, but unfortunately, that's the end of our time. So thank you, ladies. Thank you. And it was a pleasure to meet with you all today and have this conversation.
Oh my goodness. This has been so exciting. I too have learned so much. Just when you think you know it all, that's the problem. When you think you know it, you don't. You got to listen and be open. And so thank you so much for your words, for your time this afternoon, and for all of those who are listening in. I'm sure you too enjoyed it. And thank you, Alabama Power, for sponsoring this great conversation. And we want you all to attend other Why We Talk Orange Chair series. So check ywcabham.org or follow at YWCentralAL on our social. Stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.